This was nice. She hadn't had any refined company for a while, and Charles was exactly that. His men had all been shouting and pointing their weapons till she introduced herself in their language as a fellow royal seeking an audience. They were fortunate that they had responded quickly. Her beast had almost fallen upon them. After that, introductions were made, tents were pitched, and drinks were served. She dispatched her war machine to hunt whatever game filled the woods. She'd be damned if she was eating rations with the king of... what was it again? Sweden? Her glow painted the camp in a cold gray and had seemingly unnerved many of the Caroleans, especially the old man in black, who glared at her constantly and held up a crucifix whilst muttering to himself. Charles conducted himself more appropriately, making conversation and telling her of his realm. She returned the favor, describing Luna and a few of the other moons shackled to Earth during the early years of his reign. They continued their conversation for a while, discussing the battles they had fought and hoped to fight, both within the Fangmoor and beyond it. Her beast returned as he told her of the automata of iron, dropping the corpse of a colossal spiral-tusked boar at her feet. She dismissed it once more to the woodlands as the cooks butchered and cooked the animal. The smell of rendering marrow filled the camp as she shared her ambition to hunt the colossal humanoids who she had seen at the Willow. They would make fine prey, and it was rare to find a foe larger than a courtier. The meal was served, warm and perfectly seasoned, and the strange old man blessed each plate. Apart from hers, of course, which seemed to displease Charles. As they ate, he insisted on discussing more practical matters, which somewhat disturbed her good mood. However, she allowed him to continue, and assured him that she only wished to ask this Silex everyone seemed to be so obsessed with a few questions. They were making some sort of agreement, the exact details of which didn't much concern her when her courtier tore into the camp, carapace marked by a handful of crossbow bolts. This damned forest. She had wanted to enjoy the company of an equal and a warm meal, but someone had interrupted her. She didn't even want to be here, and what little pleasure she found was ruined post-haste. The temple cast her out before she could make it her own. It fractured the skull she had found. It caused her to bleed, a feat not achieved by any but the strongest champions. He had granted her a silo to assist with the expedition, for use in emergencies. But it had been granted to her, and she would use it as she wished. A black rain filled the sky as void sea tears opened, patches of pitch darkness against the sky. Armageddon passed through them, annihilating the woodland before her in bursts of radiant light. That was better. She had missed this. Missed doing what she wanted when she wanted. This forest would learn to respect her. There was nothing but a scar left. No trees, no stream, no assholes with crossbows. She bade Charles a stiff goodbye and climbed into her beast. Waning scarlet light filled it, and it blared an ancient evacuation order as she sped away. Hopefully, the Caroleans would heed it before the creeping poison that his light spawned got to them. All was quiet as they walked through the forest. Not that Norio would complain. After the event by the river, he was happy to simply walk through such a divine landscape. And judging by the smiles on the faces of his fellows, they were happy to do the same. But something still nagged at the back of his mind. An unknowable change of the wind that just wouldn't stop gnawing. He pushed any fledgling concerns to the back of his mind, refusing to worry over nothing. For now, he simply drank in the surroundings and put one foot in front of the other. All the while, they remain oblivious to the being that had just shown up. From out of the fog, a human form appears. At first, old and frail, hobbling along, bent low to the ground. Then a moment later, they rise up straight and confident, striding forward along the narrow path, now young and spry. They inspect every leaf and every blade of grass while moving forward, ever forward. There must be a flaw in the armor, a gap in the net. This cannot be the way of it, trading one prison for another. Can it? Somewhere, there is a third path. Neither fog nor fen, neither darkness nor light. Though I had known that this woman sought a parley, some of my officers saw the metal beast first as they exited the fog, and assuming the worst, began to bark out orders and prepare for battle. I was quick in my response, ordering them to stand down before things turned out for the worst. It was fortunate then that they had heeded my orders, because I could see that the beast was rising to retaliate should things have escalated. Her assurances in surprisingly fluent Swedish helped ease overall concerns. Well, aside from Father Joachim, who was acting like she was a demon from hell, complete with attempts at exorcism and silent prayers to God. While I could understand a healthy amount of caution when it came to contact with the other parties in this forest, this behavior was quite extreme, and I bade him cease, before giving the order to set up camp. A tent may not have been the most ideal location for a parley, but by God, I was going to show hospitality. However, it would seem that she had a similar idea, for as hunting parties were preparing to ride out, her metal beast had come with the slain carcass of a massive and succulent boar. Bringing my chef along proved to be a good call, for everyone would be eating well this day. As for the woman, the Moonchild, as she referred to herself, she proved to be a pleasant conversation partner, even in spite of Father Joachim's continuing disrespect. It was fortunate she paid him no mind, but I noted to myself that a lecture regarding proper etiquette would be in order. We conversed about many things. I told her of my homeland, from the vast forest that covered the swaths of Scandinavia to the roaring rivers and sprawling cities. In return, she told me of her world, a world quite similar to my own. A fact that didn't surprise me given my previous travels, with multiple moons which circled it. Sounds like quite a sight to behold. Our conversation switched to other topics as time progressed, from previous exploits to future conquests. She herself spoke of a desire to hunt a party of large humanoids that were spotted back at the Willow, Given the brutal efficiency the metal beasts exhibited, I almost felt sorry for them. But pity aside, I knew there were important matters to discuss, particularly in regards to the question of Silex. While she became visibly displeased at this, there was no complications in creating a suitable agreement. I'll be honest, I was surprised to hear that she didn't seek to capture Silex for herself, which is probably why we are able to come to this agreement. She would not interfere in our efforts to capture him, even going so far as to aid in escort. In return, we allow her an audience with him to answer any questions she might have, and we relay to her any information we acquire. I had no issues with this, but it left the question of how to contact her. After all, it was doubtful she'd be inclined to accompany us. The answer came in a device called a radio. It was as the talks were finalized that word arrived of an impending attack, emphasized by her beast returning with crossbow bolts piercing its hide. One of the other parties apparently wanted to interfere. And it was this moment that will forever be seared into my mind. For the Moonchild became furious, and in a flash, the beast unleashed some sort of weapon that burned away a sizable chunk of the forest, along with what I assumed were the offending party, before I or any of the men could process what happened. Then, with a parting warning to depart the area, she and her beast left. I decided that it was best we do the same, and I am forever grateful that the weapon we witnessed was not turned on us. Morgan Bonesong stood at the edge of the camp, as still as a dead tree. He watched the band's remaining swamp lurcher perform its duties. The hulking mass of algae and bone churned the ground, seeding new plants and drawing puddles of green water from the soil. The swamp they had cultivated yesterday had expanded to twice its size. But much more work would be required before the Undermire would be able to directly exert its influence on the Fangmoor. Morgan frowned. Would that even work? He didn't think so. Morgan was the band's Rot Herald, a sagely advisor with a heightened connection to the power of death. Perhaps his closeness to death was why the oblivion they all felt was affecting him differently. The knights had all discussed it in the night before. Gulta had explained that the sensation was surely a symptom of the Fangmoor's unnatural existence. A disconnection from the forces of life and death. Morgan didn't believe that. As death is to nature, the oblivion must be to the Fangmoor. And as death is a step towards new life, the oblivion must be a step towards something. Whatever power lurked beyond the oblivion, it called to Morgan. He couldn't renounce his loyalty to the Undermire. But here in the God Forest, where the rules of death were not the ones he had mastered, he could not be a Rot Herald. An Oblivion Herald, perhaps? Adaptation was key to survival. This was true in the Undermire and clearly true in the Fangmoor. It was time to have a private talk with Lady Blackshell. The whispers in the fog were starting to make sense.